I got the chance to listen to Tyndale and Dima. Yeah, and Dima's talk I have listened maybe it's like 3 times. It was so nice for me. And just recently we had the chance to listen and learn from Malcolm Keating and about the Nyaya philosophy. So, and I'm very glad that the argumentation community is open and diverse, and it has all these potentials to achieve its goals. And more particularly, the speaker series, it has this idea of we need an integrative approach, and I like to quote Katerina many times here, where she was just in last ICA, I think she was saying, we are not argumentation epistemologists, we are argumentation scholars. So it shouldn't be just about the epistemology of argumentation. And as she says, it turns out there is a moral component of argumentation. And I hope to give you some ideas about how this integration, how we are working towards this integration through the ADA project. So just a while ago, Andrew was talking about some of the people here. We had the opportunity to host them in Istanbul in our beautiful campus, and the audience and the participants might give you some idea about what we were trying to do and how such a hard thing we were trying to do. Basically, we had argumentation scholars, we have contemporary competitive debating experts, and we had scholars of Munazara from all over the world committing in Istanbul to reimagine what analytical competence and virtuous interaction is. So I'm very happy for all our experts and participants to be a part of this project. Now, before giving you a bit of an outline, the other project and the related issues, it's something that we have been working maybe more than 10 years now, first as a madrasa student, then as a PhD student in Ibn Khaldun University. I had the chance to study Munazara and other related Islamic disciplines. And I'm very happy that it turned out into it came to fruition in the form of the Argumentation Research Center that we have established with some of our colleagues here, and the other project that we are now about to finish. So let me give you a brief outline. So I will be talking first, and by the way, I'm planning to talk around 45 minutes, and then hopefully we can have some Q&A. I will be first talking about Munazara, and I will be talking about what is Munazara very briefly, and I will talk about competitive debating. Then I will try to make the case of our theoretical contribution to contemporary argumentation theory, which we like to call the interdependence between act and agent, which we believe to be a move beyond act-based understanding of argumentation or agent-based understanding and appraisal of argumentation. To explain this, I will talk about what we have named sequencing, basically more specifically the ordering of the antagonist's critical moves and how it relates to practical wisdom. Having this theoretical contribution, then I will move on to competitive debating, and I will try to show how we are trying to reimagine competitive debating through the Munazara model or the Munazara engagement model. And I will finish with upcoming projects and the call for collaboration, which is actually, if you ask me, the most important component for me at this moment now. And this outline will become familiar when I talk about the procedure of Munazara, which has an opening stage where you are explaining the terms, the source of the terms, and you are trying to establish the zone of agreement and disagreement. Then you have the argumentation stage. In our case, but it will be the interdependence between act and agent. I will try to convince you that this is the case when it comes to argumentation. And then there will be a concluding stage where the concluding stage of this talk, but I will try to self-evaluate and see where we can go from here onwards. There are a lot of caveats here, and we are very happy. I'm very happy to have Walter here. The Islamic theories of argument is a journey of 140 years, maybe more than this. So at least we can see that there are three distinct phases in when we are talking about the Islamic theory of argument, and Munazara is the only latest stage. So first, in the first 200 years of the Islam, you have prominent scholars and religious figures who are debating issues, juridical issues, and they are debating theological issues, and some of them have been luckily recorded, and these disagreements and debates have been recorded, and these disagreements and records that Walter likes to call proto-jadal becomes the foundation of the dialectic theories that we see coming from 9th century to 14th centuries. And the important thing here is that while the ikhtilaf tradition is not systematized, so we have debates rather than a complete argumentation theory. When we come to Jadal period, where we come to period of dialectic, we see that there emerges three different theories of argumentation actually. So you have a juridical theory of argumentation, then you have a theological theory of argumentation, and then you have the philosophers who continue the Aristotelian understanding of the topics. When we go to the period of Munazara, so we have what happens is, instead of different theories focusing on different subject matters, you have now a universal theory of argumentation, which claims that any topic can be discussed through the procedure. And so it's a field independent theory of argumentation that we see. And the Munazara is a very Munazara's origin is very, very strange. Like, you have the founding figure, the first person to write an epistle on Munazara is Shamsuddin as-Samarkandi, who you might guess, like, he was a polymath. He would write about astronomy. He would write about juridical disagreements and debates in juridical disagreements, and he was also a commentator of Avicenna, as he is known in the West. So, and we really see that the impact of different trends, different currents of philosophy meeting in Munazara. So Munazara, for some scholars, it is an evolution of Jadal, and for some other scholars, it's a revolution within the Jadal tradition. And the most important thing is that here you keep the Islamic ethical component, the spirit of ethics that you would find in the earlier debates, but now the content of debates, the content of how do you form an argument changed, and it becomes much more Aristotelian. So Munazara becomes the dominant theory of argumentation after the 14th century, and it becomes part of the madrasa curriculum, the Muslim college. You can easily see the connection between the Muslim liberal arts or the trivium here. So in the disciplines of madrasa, you have the auxiliary disciplines and you have higher disciplines. The auxiliary disciplines being grammar, logic, munazara, balagha, and the higher disciplines are the disciplines that uses the tools, the canon that are acquired from these auxiliary disciplines. Because Munazara was part of the madrasa curriculum, you see that it has garnered a lot of attention until the 20th century, actually. And this is very important. Unfortunately, when we started the other project and when I was writing the PhD, unfortunately, we did not know what are the sources. We didn't know how many authors there are. We didn't know how many independent works there were. And so that's what you are seeing now on the screen is a document that we are preparing, which we call the status report on Munazara text. And so far, we have been able to identify more than 420 works of Munazara. These are the works that specifically has in their title the word Munazara. And another caveat here, it might seem that, when I talk about Munazara, as if I'm talking about a unified, a block of a theory. but it's not the case. Just recently, Walter was saying maybe there are 4 different currents between within the Munazara tradition that has different understanding when it comes to argumentation. So I will be presenting the one that I know. I will be presenting a conception of Munazara that helped me understand Munazara when I was a madrasa student, when I studied the Munazara with my teacher. And as I said, like, unfortunately, there wasn't too many works when it comes to Munazara or introducing Munazara, but this what I'm showing you now has just arrived yesterday. Professor Shamsuddin Arif from Indonesia, he finished his translation of a very important figure and a very important book from the 18th century. And we are very lucky now. We have a full-fledged translation. And now I know that, Walter has another draft, which should be very soon online and published, inshallah. So this is the theory that we are working on. And unfortunately, it's like, you are trying to find your way in the darkness. The books are not translated. We don't know which kind of books, which kind of contributions they were. So please take whatever I'm saying about Munazara, please take it with a pinch of salt. Now, so because there isn't much work when it comes to Munazara intellectual history other than some figures that some of them are here, Munazara is absent from contemporary argumentation scholars. The very famous Handbook of Argumentation, unfortunately, does not mention Munazara. However, because of the sheer amount of work and the centuries, this Munazara deserves to be its own field of study. And so there is now Munazara as a theory, although the Munazara as a theory has faded away, starting from the 19th century to 20th century, when understood as a practice, the practice of arguing or debate, the Munazara can be translated as debate, and that's why we have now in Qatar and in some other Muslim countries, we have now debating institutions like the Qatar debate, Munazara Qatar, that are now trying to establish the culture of argumentation and debate in the Muslim world. And I was very lucky to be with them in Qatar and see what they are trying to do when it comes to contributing to the academic scholarship through Munazara. The fate of Munazara, interestingly, is shared by the competitive debate. Unfortunately, competitive debate has 7, if I'm not wrong, the competitive debating section in the Handbook of Argumentation Theory is like 7 pages. It seems that, after the communication departments in US has failed, and now you don't have debate coaches who are also tenured or tenure track academics. You don't have much scholarship going on in competitive debating. But interestingly, this is a promising venue for research and practice, and this is the kind of loopholes that we are trying to fill through the ADA project. So we have one component referring to the argumentation theory and how we understand argumentation theory. And the second component is how we can conceptualize argumentation theory as a debate practice. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to talk to you a bit about the theoretical contributions of Munazara, and then I will try to show you how we are reimagining Munazara in this context. So let's start with some basics and complexities. What we call Munazara is the full name of the discipline is Adab al-Bahs wal Munazara, which can be translated as manners of inquiry and argumentation, literally. And what makes things a bit hard here, the terms adab and munazara are used interchangeably. So you would hear scholars writing about the science of adab, or they would say, I'm writing a book on the science of adab, or they would say, I'm writing a book on the science of munazara. So when you try to understand where this interchangeability comes, you see that the term munazara can refer to procedural rules, the canon where you are trying to establish, which are presumed to be universal. And you have, as a translation of munazara, understood as the dispositions of arguers. So when scholars explain what is Munazara, they will tell you it's the procedural rules, and also it is the disposition of arguers. And just recently, I had the chance to read Professor Tyndale's paper in the Tokyo Proceedings to Conference of Argumentation, and he talks about how this idea of disposition of arguers was actually very important when it comes to Perelman and their rhetorical, new rhetoric project. So because these terms are very hard to translate, you have a wide array of translation offered for adab. So you have etiquette, you have manners, you have applied ethics, you have protocols, and you have virtuous conduct. And I have translated adab as virtuous conduct, taking from an 18th century scholar, Al-Qarsi, who wrote when he was explaining what is adab. He said, adab is the duties that fall upon one for a debater for a good disputation, which is munazara, that requires epistemic and practical virtues. So adab has ties to the procedural rules. It is about the duties that one should follow, and it also has a relation with epistemic and practical virtues as well. So how is this possible? In Munazara, the goal of argumentation is manifestation of truth. And to achieve this goal, parties, the debaters, the arguers, they cooperate by performing their rights and upholding their obligations. To make a case for interdependence between the act and the agent, I will be specifically talking about the ordering of legitimate moves available to the antagonist. So antagonist has a wide array of moves available to her, and how to order this, we will see that, when we discuss how to order your legitimate critical moves, you will be referring both to the procedure and the agent at the same time. So now, what are those critical moves? So imagine that we have a protagonist, and the protagonist has a claim, has a motion, and the protagonist is making an argument, has made an argument for this motion and claim. The antagonist has three legitimate moves, which we call critical moves, which is a slight differentiation from Krabbe's and Wallner's terminology. You have three critical moves, and you have their forces. So let's see. So the Munazara scholars, they agreed that these are the three moves that the antagonist has, and there were so the discussion was how to order them. So to understand this, let's begin with the objection. The first move is the objection, and it focuses on the premise. Objection addresses the premise, and the way to deliver an objection is to say, I don't grant your minor premise, I don't grant your major premise. And by doing so, you are requesting from the protagonist to defend the premise that you are objecting to. The second move available to antagonist, the critical move available to antagonist, is the refutation, which is not a good translation actually, but for the moment, I'm just going with this. The second move is refutation, and it focuses on the argument. The refutation talks about, so when objection deals with the building blocks of the premises, of the arguments, refutation deals with the argument overall, the argument itself. And the way to deliver a refutation is to say your argument is refuted with the evidence X. So when you are performing a refutation, basically, you are saying to the other party, I did not come to your claim yet. I'm not talking about your claim yet, but your argument for that claim seems to be deficient. So there seems to be some form of deficiency and inconsistency when it comes to your argument. So by performing a refutation, what you are doing is you're requesting defense or a new deficiency-free argument from the protagonist. And the last legitimate critical move that the antagonist has is the counter-argument. And the counter-argument focuses on the claim. There is this whole debate in the Munazara tradition about the focus of the counter-argument. So let's go with the claim here. And so the counter-argument focuses on the claim, and the way to deliver a counter-argument is to say, for instance, your claim is wrong because, then you give the argument for the negation of the claim. And basically what happens in a counter argument is you are effectively requesting to change the argumentative roles. Now, as the antagonist, you want to become the protagonist. So now let's imagine this in an example to make it more concrete. So you have, let's see that we are debating the motion or the claim that artificial intelligence is beneficial to society. And the protagonist will go along and will say, this is the Aristotelian fashion that I have written, the Aristotelian syllogism. You have, like, all technologies that have a net positive impact on society are beneficial. Artificial intelligence has a net positive impact on society. Therefore, artificial intelligence is beneficial to society. So when the protagonist comes up with their argument, as an antagonist, I have three options. I can make an objection. I can say, I deny your premise regarding the net positive impact of artificial intelligence. What leads you to such characterization? Or I can similarly say, your argument is refuted by the evidence that it commits the fallacy of hasty generalization, as it does not account for potential negative aspects of such technologies. Or alternatively, I can also say, I can come up with my counter argument for why artificial intelligence is not beneficial to society, and I can say, artificial intelligence can potentially lead to severe societal impacts, such as job loss due to automation and threats to privacy. Therefore, artificial intelligence is not beneficial to society. So now the issue is, you have these three legitimate moves focusing on different elements of the protagonist's discourse. And imagine that you have all the three available to you, meaning that the protagonist's argument has premises that you are objecting to. The overall argument seems to be deficient, or there is some form of inconsistency in the argument. And you have a counter argument that you believe, that you firmly hold, that the negation of the claim, in our case, artificial intelligence, is not beneficial to society, is the correct claim that should be coming. So what are you going to do? This issue has also been debated in the Munazara tradition. And when you go to tradition, you will see that there are three different sequence prescriptions. Like, you have these three legitimate moves. And so in the literature, we see there are three different ways for the antagonist to sequence their moves. So you have, for instance, Giorgiani, who says, you need to start with the objection, with the premises, then continue with the refutation, and then end with counter argument. So there are also different ways to understand the sequencing of antagonists' moves. So in our papers, when we are analyzing the differences when it comes to prescriptions of certain moves, we have found that the justifications that are offered by these scholars or their commentators, like Giorgiani, Molla Hanafi, and Sachak-Lezadeh, for their respective sequences, they rely on enacting a certain value of argumentation. So in the case of sequence one, we have found that the idea of coalescent cooperation. So I need to a bit recap. So the goal of argumentation is manifestation of truth, and you are obliged to cooperate with your protagonist or antagonist to achieve this goal. And these three different sequencing prescriptions are different ways for the antagonist to cooperate with the protagonist. And when we analyze their way of cooperation and through the sequencing of critical moves, we have found that there are three different values that are embedded in a certain procedural sequence that our authors are prescribing. So when it comes to the first sequence, you have coalescence as a value of argumentation to be enacted by the arguer. Then in the second one, you have reliability as an idea and as a value to be enacted. And in this third one, you have efficacy, the being an efficient antagonist as much as you can, as the value offered to the antagonist. So unfortunately, I have a lot to cover, so I will not be dealing with all of them, but I will just show you the first sequence. So when we are trying to understand and read between the lines why the prescribers of the sequence 1 asks us to go with their way, we see that they will tell you an objection which deals with the premise, and it requests from the protagonist to defend their premises, does not have the risk to shift the burden of proof. So by performing an objection, you are sure that you will not be usurping your roles. You will stay as an antagonist. Then, what you are doing is you are checking the acceptability of the premises. You are trying to understand, are these premises acceptable for me? And the way to do is to ask further, proof or arguments for that premise. Then we see that the second option, the second move to be ordered is the refutation. And when we see that, the refutation allows the protagonist to offer a new argument. So in the case of a refutation, when I say that, okay, when I say to you, okay, I don't want to talk about your claim now, which we are debating, but it seems your argument for that claim seems to be wrong. What you are doing is you are allowing the protagonist here to offer a new argument. So you are giving them the option to either object to your refutation, or to give you a new argument and to remain as the protagonist as it goes. And when it comes to counter argument here, we see that they are given at the last move of the sequence is the counter argument according to the sequence 1. So when we examine the forces of these moves, we see that objection is the weakest move, and then comes refutation, and then comes the strongest move. So what happens in sequence 1 is that the antagonist is working with the protagonist rather than against them. And the whole goal of the antagonist here is to allow the protagonist to perform their duty. To do so, the antagonist is arguing in a coalescent way and enacting the value of coalescence. Now, so we believe the idea, the different prescriptions that are offered in the Munazara literature are moving beyond the act and agent-based dichotomy that we see in contemporary argumentation scholarship. What is here is that we have one element, which is sequencing, which aims to enact certain values of argumentation, and which aims to establish different kinds of cooperation, are in the middle of the act-based considerations and agent-based considerations. So by performing a certain sequence, in our case, sequence 1, you are embodying the act. The procedure itself is embodying the sequence, and the agent is performing this sequence. And when we go to the Munazara tradition, remember Al-Qarsi's definition that the adab are the duties that require practical and epistemic virtues. We see that the repetition of a certain sequence leads to the cultivation of virtues by performing a certain cooperation type and enacting a value of argumentation. So this is the basic premise that we have found so far in the Munazara tradition. There might be many others, so this is what we have focused. And taking this as our theoretical understanding of Munazara, we have aimed to apply this to. We are now trying to apply to this contemporary debating models. And unfortunately, because of time, I don't have a lot of time to discuss this issue. I really want to refer to you the papers that we have written on this subject. And I took a lot of help from Karim Sadek when we are writing this, and he is much more eloquent when it comes to explaining these issues. Now, so we have three sequences, three different values and types of cooperation for the virtuous arguer to become a virtuous sequencer. So in the case of sequence 1, you have the type of cooperation to be the coalescent cooperation, and in the case of as the argumentation value to be enacted is the coalescence and the virtues that are associated with this sequence, with this procedural rules are patience and humility. Basically, imagine yourself as an antagonist, and the protagonist is giving you an argument, and you have this very hard pressing argument, a counter argument against the argument of the protagonist. But the sequence one tells you, no, you are not allowed to begin your critical reaction with a counter argument. First, you need to deal with the building blocks of the argument. Then you need to move to the argument itself, and then you need to move to the counter argument. You should perform the counter argument at last. So it requires the performing of sequence one requires from you the patience, and it requires you the humility to say, okay, maybe there is something that I am not seeing here. So let me begin. Let me become an antagonist, and let me try to remain as an antagonist as much as I can in a meaningful way, so that I can understand the position that my friend has. So each sequence has different virtues and values related to it. So when it comes to sequence one, we have patience and humility. When it comes to sequence two, you have diligence and open-mindedness in terms of being able to allowing the protagonist. And when it comes to sequence three, you have agonism and strategy as the virtues that are trying to be developed through performing the sequence over and over. So the repetition of sequencing, we have claimed that cultivating in yourself the ability to perform the sequence one, sequence two, or sequence three, we believe it helps with habituating virtues. And when it comes to practical wisdom, choosing between different sequence types. So are you going to choose sequence one, sequence two, sequence three, is a component of practical wisdom. You need to know when, in which context, why to perform a certain sequence. So you see that sequencing has ties with the procedure, and it has ties with the agent. And to understand the phenomenon of sequencing, you need to move beyond the act and the agent. Now let me go to the contemporary debate models, and let me see how much time I have. Yeah. So the contemporary debate models, let me just begin with the common positions. The common positions are, they are prevalent in universities and high schools. They are understood as a sport, with each model having different skills and dispositions to be developed. So this is an idea that we are also sharing with them. The policy and Lincoln Douglas are peculiar to US. So you have British styles, you have American styles, the British style being the British parliamentary model. And for our purposes, the common positions, one of the common positions that you will see is that during a debate, parties are facing the judge or the audience. But in Munazara, the issue is that you have to be in the same rank, and you need to be facing each other. And the debaters are assigned to an argumentative role randomly. So you don't argue for what you believe, you just argue what has been given to you. And most of the time now it is just an algorithm decides the protagonist and antagonist. And the rounds are organized in speeches with a definite time limit. So in each model, you have different forms of speech design. You have 7 minute talks, you have 3 minute talks. And also the models are designed in a way that they don't allow the change of mind or acknowledgement of defeat when it comes to when you are arguing. So these are the elements that we have found to be common in debate models. Now we dig deeper a bit, and then let's see the diverging positions. So in the British parliamentary, so the diverging positions, there are many, and I really recommend you the paper that will come soon that we are writing with Mehmet Ali Hoca here. In British parliamentary, you have 2 teams for the government and 2 teams for opposition. And the way to interact between the other party, between the other aisle, is through short points of information, which means that there are these times during the speech of during the speech of a debater that you can ask a short point of information. You just ask a clarification question. And the idea is like, you're trying to allow the protagonist to make up their case. In the American policy debate model, you have an affirmative and negative team. So you don't have two teams for the same position, but you have one team defending a position and one team testing it. The one-to-one interaction is, so you don't have points of information when it comes to the American policy, but what you are doing is there is this session called cross-examination during the debate. After the constructive speeches, you have the other party coming and making a cross-examination, asking questions on the Socratic style. And the basic idea is you gather all this information during the cross-examination and you use the knowledge or what has been conceded and granted by the other team to make a case for the rebuttal of their arguments. So this is also the same when it comes to Lincoln and Douglas, with the only difference being that in Lincoln Douglas, you don't have teams debating for a motion, but you have two individuals. And you also have different models, understanding, argumentation, and debate in a different way. For instance, you have intercollegiate ethics bowl, where you have two teams, which is shared by British parliamentary and American policy. But the difference is the two teams are not presenting the same issue, the same motion. So first you have the presenting team talking about an ethical issue, then you have the commenting team commenting upon their presentation. Then the roles change, but this time in the intercollegiate ethics bowl, you are not the antagonist as the antagonist or as the opposition. You will not be saying the negation of what the other party is saying. You're just going to discuss a completely different ethical issue. So this is their way. This is their design understanding of limiting adversality when it comes to debates. So what we did here is that we after our research of the Munazara literature and of the contemporary debate models, we made certain concessions when it comes to debate models. So first of all, we agreed with the idea that the parties at least in this preliminary stage, the parties should be assigned a role randomly, and this is in good spirits with Munazara tradition, which argues that it's not important from whose voice truth is manifest. So if it's the case, we said that then it should be the case that parties are assigned to random roles for the manifestation of truth. And also we made the concession that there should be, unfortunately, after our simulations, which just yesterday I was making a simulation in Rotterdam, unfortunately we are not able to stop when we are speaking. So the idea was like we want to have this very much move-based conception of argumentation, as we have seen and debate, as we have seen when we were discussing the ordering of the sequencing of critical moves of the antagonist. Every move has a force and it has a focus, and it has a way to deliver this, which shows that the conception of Munazara is very much move-based rather than speech-based. But unfortunately, our simulations have shown that at this earlier stage, we instead of asking our parties to be able to perform the Munazara in the traditional way, we are giving our debaters certain time limits in which we are encouraging them to perform a certain move. So imagine you are an antagonist, we are giving you 1 minute, and in this 1 minute, we ask you to perform a move. We are encouraging you to perform a move. So these are the concessions that we have made to contemporary argumentation theories, contemporary debating models. Now, let me just briefly discuss the preliminary Munazara model that we have established. So this is very much based on the traditional Munazara procedure, where you have the opening stage, you have the argumentation stage, and you have the concluding stages. And each stage has when it comes to the content of argumentation and the role it plays during the procedure, has different functions. The opening stage is a time where the parties, the debaters, discuss the terms that they will be debating. So let's say if we are debating the artificial intelligence is beneficial to society, we want to understand what the term artificial intelligence means. We want to understand from which source this term is coming, and when we are debating the artificial intelligence being beneficent, we need to know the context of the debate. In which context? Is it in the developing world? Is it in the already developed world, etc.? And by the end of the opening stage, we ask parties to hand down us a written resolution, which shows that we have agreed to argue on the specific motion artificial intelligence is beneficial to society, with the idea that this is the meaning of artificial intelligence, etc. Then comes the argumentation stage. What happens in the argumentation stage is you remember what we have seen in the when we were discussing the sequencing of the moves of the critical moves of the antagonist. What you have is we are giving our parties 1 minute to, let's say you are the protagonist, you have 1 minute to explain what is your argument, your initial argument, and as the antagonist, you are encouraged to perform a move, and we are encouraging the antagonist to perform the sequence 1. For each move, what we are trying to establish is that we ask our parties to be able to label the moves that they are performing. In the sense, let's go along with the case of antagonist. We want our antagonist to say that I am now objecting to your premise. We want our antagonist to say that I am now refuting your argument. And when it comes, the same applies for the protagonist as well. We want our protagonist to be able to say that I am going to defend my premise, or to say that I am going to offer a new argument for my claim, which we believe that it will help with our through this repetition. We will be able to understand the components, the elements of argument, and we will be by performing certain sequences, as in this case the sequence 1, we will hope to see that the parties are able to enact the values of argumentation and gain and acquire the dispositions required for performing a certain sequence. And in the concluding stage, this is also what we have in the Munazara tradition. What we have as an alternative, as a reimagination of Munazara as a competitive debating, is that we want our parties to offer a meta reflection on argumentation. We want the debaters to say that this is not a part where they are arguing about the specific motion or the claim, but this is the part that we want them to reflect on what happened just in the argumentation stage. So we want them to say that I was on the right, I was on the right side of the issue, or I was on the wrong side of the issue because. So this is the part that we hope that the certain virtues such as courage, honesty, sincerity will be developed. So as you see, each stage has different goals, and it has different virtues in mind. Now, to conclude, it all look good, very good on paper, but there is the claim that following a certain sequence will eventually lead to the acquisition of certain dispositions is a big claim, and this claim that the debate has certain effects on the agential dispositions and character traits have also been shared by the contemporary competitive debating models, but unfortunately there are no research there are no, let's say, scientifically established empirical projects that can show this is in fact the case. And when it comes to Munazara, the whole idea of manifestation of truth, the idea that there is cooperation, that there are certain values that are enacted, that it will help you to become a virtuous arguer, conducting argumentation in a virtuous way. These are all big claims that needs to be studied, empirically studied if possible. And remember, I told you, in the outline, I will begin with describing the terms, what is Munazara, what is competitive debate, then I will make an argument. And our argument was the idea of interdependence between act and the agent. which seems to show that, which seems to suggest that, you know, by performing a certain process, by performing certain procedural rules and following them, this will eventually help you cultivate certain virtues. And now, in the conclusion, I am making basically what the literature called the concluding stage. I am concluding with a meta-reflection, actually, that these all look good on paper, but we need collaboration to further test these issues. So there is this need for collaboration to make a rigorous empirical and integrative research program of argumentation and debate. Now, this is, you can scan your phones to go to the website of the ADA project if you want. Thank you very much for listening. I don't know how much time did I take.